So, good morning everyone. So, pasensya na sa sabak na construction doon sa among balay. So, okay. So first, before we start our discussion, we will have first our opening prayer. May I ask Sir Ronald Andal to please lead us the opening prayer? Would you mind, sir?
Sige. Let us pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Ang
Lord, salamat sa adlaw nga gihatag sa among karon. Salamat sa kinabuhi nga imong gina ginahatag sa among matag adlaw sa mga blessings o sa kinabuhi, Lord. And Lord, nangay mi pasaylo sa mga kasaypanan diha kanimo sa unahuna man sa pulong ug sa unahuna. Unta Lord pasayloon mi nimo. And Lord, i-guide si Gabriel karong adlaw, Lord God, sa iyang pag-report, Lord God. Ikaw maghatag kaniya og kusog, maghatag kaniya og kanang um, kaharuhay aron mahuman niya og tarong ang iyang report. Okay, ta Lord God, among baligya kanimo lamang, among halangdon. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Okay. So, now we will proceed to the discussion. So our topic for today is all about introduction to Cold War and weapon reproduction or weapons of mass destruction. So ayan. So this is under the we're now in unit 4 under human rights, Cold War and neocolonialism. So we are now in the second part of our unit, which is all about Cold War. So before we proceed, let us have our intended learning outcome. So first is our outcome interpret the causes and timeline of the Cold War. So before we proceed to the discussion proper on Cold War, let's have uh, check first sa ating discussion last session. So since si Kuya Anuta lang yung naa sa last session. So Kuya, would you like to share our discussion last session? What is all about? Hello? Kuya Anuta, pakigalaw po ng baso.
sa ako upward murag lag kay ako ang entrance usaba daw.
Ay, okay, okay. What was our discussion last session po? Kuya? Okay, so murag katolag lagi si Kuya, no? So our discussion last session was all about the Universal Declaration of Human
Ay kat
Rights. So we discussed about the
article
30 articles.
United Nation kay lag kaayo basta katong about sa article sa human rights na gibuhat sa United po.
Okay, yes. Thank you so much. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights kung saan diniscuss doon sa United Nations yung different rights of different individuals. So yun siya. So so now let us now proceed to the discussion on Cold War. But first, I will have to ask you question. So our question is, naranasan nyo na bang sa inyong buhay, naranasan nyo na bang pumili sa dalawa or nagpili between two choices in life? O kanang mga sitwasyon ninyo nga kanang gipapili jud mo between two choices like that. Pwede bugat siya nga risk, ay pwede bugat siya nga kon or pwede kanang kan lang siya nga experience nga nang gipapili mo between the two. Okay, so nor, ay tama ba siya? Nor,
Yes.
Norlia.
Ay, pwede ko mag-ask.
Yes, please answer the
Okay, medyo
question.
di na ako maunsa.
Ah, okay, sige, sige, wait lang.
Di
Okay,
na ko maunsa.
Nor,
Pwede
in your
pakichat.
life. Okay, sige, sige. Okay ha. Pero unahon ako si Nor, pero chat sa na ako ang question. So, okay. So, may pagkat, in your life, ikaw ko English. Have you encountered, have you encountered, sana, something like that? Have you encountered choosing between two choices or mga panig, mga, okay. Okay na na, sir, makakuha naman na. Okay. Kay Nor. Hello, Nor.
Hello, Gab.
So, in your life daw, sa iyong buhay, naka-experience ka na ba na ipapili ka sa duha ka choices?
Yes,
Yes, what is that, Nor? Please share it with
ano,
us.
ah, course, di papili ko sa course oh, duha. Tapos akong gipili dapat or teacher or nursing. Tapos akong gipili nursing. Tapos ang gihimo nila, mas gusto nila murag i-push nila sa ko ang teacher. So, no choice, teacher na lang ko. Gi-adapt na lang ako.
Ay, okay. So, no, ay kadang sad siya, no? Because, katulagi, the final decision is, comes from your parents. But, ito siya, I hope, Nor, no, you will, sa kanya naman ka, no? So, of course, I hope you will find happiness in the education program, 'di ba? Happy man ka, Nor, no, sa education. Nor, are you happy with your choice to stick with education? Hala, wala na nito mag si Nor. Ako na to siya.
Di, sa 100%, 50% lang akong happy sa
Okay, okay. Ikaw, sir. Sir Sapayani, have you ever come up with that experience? Share it with us. Mm. Oh, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for thank you so much for being brave, sir, in sharing your story. Okay. Okay, so okay, let's go to the discussion proper na, no? So let's start. So our discussion is all about Cold War. Okay, so what is in Cold War? So so may relation po siya na yung ating diniscuss kanina. It is the long-lasting and continuing confrontation between the Soviet Union and the United States from 1945 to 1989. So this Cold War is just between these two super powerful countries. So these are the United States and the Soviet Union. So Cold War, why so cold? Bakit ang lamig? Bakit Cold War yung term na ginamit nila? So, it is called Cold War because these two superpowers never declared war on each other and engaged into combat. So, cold because wala masyadong pagpapakita ng kato siya mga encounter or conflict or battle between them. 'Di ba? In life, we called someone cold ka ng katulagi magparamdam, magpakita pero pagkataod-taod mawala na dayon. Like sa chat, okay, okay pa pagkataod-taod kay dili na mo reply. So siya ay cold na siya, cold na yung relationship, cold na siya nga pagkatao. Like that, 'di ba, sir? Char. Okay, so that is on Cold War. Kato siya ha. Cold War because they never engaged with each other on combat or declared war upon one another. So the US and the Soviet Union had worked together against Axis powers, but after World War II, their tensions rise as they have disagreement and conflict. As you remember, di ba, from our discussion in World War II, these two countries, the Soviet Union and the United States, together with Great Britain, is under the Allied powers in World War II against the Axis powers. So, kani silang dua is close pa ni sila, kumbaga ba sa friends, close sila. They work together, especially in the World War II. However, after the World War II, there is now tensions between them. So that's why they see that may mga disagreement and conflicts sila, especially on one of the maybe factors of this is on the reconstruction of Europe, since Europe is a war-torn continent after the World War II. Kano siya kani sila unim superpowers, mga powerful countries, US and Soviet Union, have planned in reconstructing Europe. However, yung plano is not really so that's why nagawa sila siya and mayroon ko because to the Cold War. So both of these powers increase their military capabilities, expand their global influence, and undermine others' way of life. So habang kato sila in tension, in conflict, bisag dili sila even they are not declaring war on each other, these powers just pabunggahay lang sila pakusgayanay na jud sila sa ilang mga powers even though they are not declaring war or there is war, no war at all. So habang there is no declaration of war, they increase their military capabilities, their influence around the world, and undermine or makikuan sa life sa ubang country or other kanang control sa other country. So in the United States, they believe in a capitalist system of free markets, multiple political parties. So the free markets in the capitalist system is headed or controlled by the individual by the individual. Okay, while the Soviet Union is on the communist system. They believe in the communist system, which is controlled by a centralized state. The state is the one controlling uh, the system, or especially in the markets, the 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 state is the one in control, and it's only in a single political party. So that is their differences, especially when it comes to how a nation or country is controlled. So yun. So there are three features defined in the Cold War. So as we progress with our discussion, these three features, may makita nato siya in situation. So these are the three features. So first is the threat of nuclear war. So we will discuss later on the different missiles and different nuclear weapons that the two countries have. And second, competition over the allegiance of newly independent nations. So there are nations na ginakontrol pod nila. So mo to siya. And then three is military and economic support of each other's enemies around the world. So habang nagakon pod sila sa ila, they support also other military and economic, they support in the military and economy of the different countries around the world. So that is the three defined features, key features defined in the Cold War. So later on, mayroong mga situations matouch ni siyang mga features. So the first highlight is the bipolar world. So bipolar from the word prefix bi, which means two or dalawa, and polar, which means kind of magkahiwalay or special, also opposite. So the bipolar world is used especially in the Cold War, where the world is divided into two two powers or two states. Especially in this Cold War, we have the United States and the Soviet Union. So let us go to the USSR, or the um, United Social United Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So that is USSR, or as we commonly known as the Soviet Union. So they came out with prestige from having fought against Hitler's Germany. So yun nga, they are from the Allied powers in the World War II. They fought against the Axis powers, especially one of them is Germany and their leader, Adolf Hitler. So they were given a new lease of life because of their heroic resistance, exemplified by their victory in Stalingrad. So from the Katusha, they were painted to be great and heroic because again on their resistance on the Axis powers during World War II, and also by their victory in Stalingrad. Stalingrad is a part of the Soviet Union, so that is where in that time on World War II, the German forces were attacking already to enter the part of the Soviet Union, which here is the place of Stalingrad. The Soviet Union, the forces of Soviet Union won that war. So that's why kato siya kuan ilang victory ato nga time sa World War II. And then, after that, they offered ideological, economic, and social model extending to Europe. So now this time of this Cold War, on the period of Cold War, they have now this mga ideologies that can help their country, that they think, they believe that it can help their country's economy and society, but also to other countries, especially in Europe. So their armies There was not demobilized at the end of the war, which makes them superior in terms of men and heavy weapons. So after the war, World War II, hindi na demobilize or hindi na retreat or gipapahawa ang mga forces of the Soviet Union's army. So na lang to sila kung asa sila nagkon sa World War. So that's why they are still superior in terms of kanang ilang mga forces, ilang mga men, and especially with their weapons. So is we have the United States, the second half of the Cold War. So they were considered to be the great victor of World War II. So aside from Soviet Union though, so United States is considered to be the great victor of World War II because we can see that on the on the situation of World War II, uh, there is more parang documentation or situations that is happening between the forces of the United States during World War II. Kumbaga, daghan sila ganap ato nga time. So by their victory, they were considered to be the great victor because they have much influence and much greater katong nagawa in that war. So their human and material losses were low. So maliit lang yung na-cost sa kanila during the war. However, after the war, their army was almost completely demobilized. Kipakuan din sila sa lugar kung asa sila nag-declare of war after the end of the hostilities. However, even na demobilized ang ilang army, they still remain to be the world's leading military power. Kasi din, konti lang din yung nabawas sa kanila, especially in their human and material aspects sa kanilang army o sa kanilang battle. Then, until 1949, they are the only country to produce nuclear weapons. So, before that, in 1949, we will discuss later ano nangyari dyan sa 1949. But before that, United States is the only country to produce nuclear weapons. Diba, as we can see in the discussion on World War II, we see what happened on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 'Di ba? Gibombahan sila nuclear weapons galing sa United States. So yun, ganon ka powerful yung United States that time. And then they are the world's leading economic power, both volume of trade and industrial and agricultural production. So during this time na din, sila na yung leading economic power since there is now the trade and in the industrial and the agricultural production. And lastly, they owned more than 2/3 of the world's gold reserves and the dollar. So malaki-laki yung halaga ng dollar at saka yung world's gold kasi meron din silang yung mga country na control din nila. So this country, yung mga country na yun is one of the producers or one of the mga resources sa mga gold. So that's why siya since under man sila sa control sa US, so US also now is also in hold of this reserve. So that's why they are considered to be the leading one of the most super powerful countries in this time, especially in discuss what happened in 1949, di ba? A while ago, I discussed that until 1949, the US is the only country who is the leading producer of nuclear weapon. However, in the summer of 1949, the first Soviet atomic bomb exploded, which reinforced USSR in its role as a world power. So we don't know na alam na natin na the US is the producer of nuclear weapons before 1949, but we don't know baka yun nga the USSR is now under the construction or producing also nuclear. 'Di ba? So, 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 Okay, sir. Okay, so again, let us now proceed to the origins of Cold War. So in Cold War, after the surrender of Nazi Germany in May 1945, an alliances unraveled between US and Great Britain and the Soviet Union on the other hand. So after the World War II, there is a presence of Great Britain, especially maybe because of uh, okay lang ka, sir. So in 1948, the Soviets had installed the left-wing governments in Eastern Europe that had been liberated by the Red Army. So during the World War II, no, diba, the Soviet Unions have their army go to different countries, especially those who are in control with the Axis powers. So at the end of the World War II, since they are not demobilized, the army of the Soviet Union are still there in the country where they participated in the war. So in there, they've taken the chance to install their government or their control in those countries, especially in Eastern Europe. So US and Britain feared the domination of Soviet in Eastern Europe, which will threat the spread of communist parties to democracies of Western Europe. So especially, di ba, kada end sa World War II is there is an agreement or treaty, especially what happens in or after World War One na hindi na silang bawal na mag-control ang ibang mga countries to other countries. However, na-fail rin gyapon siya because katulad gyapon na nagyapon yung mga countries na mag-take chance, especially sa mga less powerful nga mga countries. And with that, US and Britain feared na mag-dominate na po ni si Soviet Union, especially on Eastern Europe. Since Soviet Union is more on communist ideologies, they also fear na communism will also spread. Nag-spread na siya sa Eastern Europe, mas spread pa dyan siya sa western part sa Europe. Since western part sa Europe is kato siya controlled by the United States, especially in this Cold War. So, more explanation from that is one of the reasons why they believe, especially US believe in that, is on the domino theory. So what is in this domino theory? So, di ba makita nato sa kanang pag-stack nato ang domino into one line. Pag matumba ang isa ka domino is matumba pud ang mga mosunod nato nga mga domino. So mo to siya ang sa domino theory. So, pag ang communism daw, kato siya mag-spread na daw ang communism, especially for example, tapad nga country sa Soviet Union, mo kato siya mag-domino effect, mukalat na pud ang communism sa mga musunod nga mga countries. And pag kani siya sa Eastern Europe, pag mukalat na daw ni siya ang communism, na tsansa nga moabot na sa Western Europe ang communist na ideology. So the Soviets were determined to maintain control of Europe to protect against the renewed threat from Germany. So isa po daw sa mga reasons daw nila is they remained in control in Eastern Europe katulad daw basin na threat, new threat from Germany. But also one is also to spread their ideologies, kato siya spread communism especially worldwide. So aside from Eastern Europe na sila'y plano nga ipalaganap pa jud ang komunismo. So the Cold War solidified by 1947 to 1948 when US provided aid to Western Europe under the Marshall Plan. So under the Marshall Plan, muna siya tong aid na tabang sa gikan sa US padulong sa Europe, especially in Western Europe, kung asa katong mga countries nga na-destroyed or na-appeal tungod sa war. So these are the Marshall Plan and the aid brought by the Americans also brought the countries in Western Europe under American influence. So while the Soviets installed openly communist regimes in Eastern Europe. So di ba na-discuss na to ganina nga katong sa pag-abot sa World War because of the disagreements and conflicts between Americans and the Soviets. So mo ni siya, especially itong sa reconstruction or war-torn Europe. So sa Western Europe, naning US sa ilang Marshall Plan, sa Soviets na ilang plano po kung asa mag-install po sila mga communist regimes sa countries in this part. So now after that origins, let us now discuss the struggle between superpowers. So in this discussion, may bala nato ang mga strategies magipanghimo sa two opposing superpowers. So the Cold War reached its peak in 1948 to 1953. In the 1948 to 1949, the Soviets unsuccessfully blockaded the Western-held sectors of West Berlin. So here, the Soviets na-fail nila nga ma-blockade ang West Berlin since na po yung mga nagagunit po dira nga part. So start na to siya kay nagasugod ng mga Soviets. And then in 1949, US and its European allies formed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization or NATO. So this NATO is a unified military command to resist the Soviet presence in Europe. So kihimo ning NATO or NATO and ATO because kato ma-stop or ma-prevent ang spread of communism, especially across Europe. And then the Soviets, especially kato ganina, na-discuss na the Soviet exploded their first atomic warhead. And then the Chinese communists came to power in mainland China. So aside from USSR or the Soviets, so the China also is known for communism. So kato siya, the Chinese communists came power in mainland China. So in 1950 to 1953, the Soviet-supported Communist government of North Korea invaded US-supported South Korea in 1950, setting off Korean War that lasted until 1953. So this Cold War, meron din palang mga wars talaga na nangyari during this time. But let's remember, Cold War is this between Soviets and Americans. But here in 1950, 1953, kanin siya ang Korean War between the North Korea and South Korea. However, dili wala man jud nakipagkuan ang katong nakipagbattle pero support ni sila sa duha ka superpower since North Korea is controlled by the Soviets and South Korea is controlled by the United States. So this Korean War lasted for 3 years, 1950 to 1953. Then after that, from 1953 to 1957, the tensions relaxed owing to the death of longtime dictator Joseph Stalin in 1953. So Joseph Stalin is one of the prominent figures, especially when it comes to um, to the rise of Cold War or the tensions between the United States and Soviet Union. So pag-abot na sa death ni Joseph Stalin in 1953, so medyo na bawas-bawasan ang tension between sa duha ka superpowers. And the Soviet bloc countries formed the Warsaw Pact in 1955. Di ba kanina the US US formed the NATO, the National North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So for the Soviets, they have the Warsaw Pact in 1955. So this Warsaw Pact is kato siya murag kanang pagkuan lang pud sa NATO sa United States from the forces of United States. So napoy ilaha nga pact or organization ang mga Soviets. So kato sa mga Soviet bloc countries natong Warsaw Pact, while West Germany now is admitted into NATO. So in 1958 and 1962, US and Soviet Union began developing ballistic missiles. So here na 'di ba na 'di ba US isa sa mga producer sa nuclear weapons. Then in 1949 hanap po day nuclear weapons ang Soviet Union. So in this time 1958 to 1962, they began now developing more ballistic missiles, mga missile na mas grabe pagurog ka ng impact kumbaga. And in 1962, the Soviets began secretly installing missiles in Cuba. So since Cuba is in below the United States, so ganong gihimo na nila dito because murag preparation lang nila when it comes to kanang katulagi katong war lagi pero wala na gyapoy nangyari nga war because it's Cold War. Iko lang sila nga maghanda-handa, mag-prepare sa mangyari nga dako nga war pero wala jud sila gina-declare. Mao na Cold War jud siya. Handa-handa lang sila pero wala nang nangyari. So mo to siya, the Soviets installed the Cuban missiles in order to retaliate to the United States. I-attack nila ang United States. Pag mangyari nga, mu-attack po ang United States sa ilaha. So this caused the Cuban Missile Crisis. So with this crisis, a confrontation that brought the two superpowers to the brink of war. Di ba 1958 to 1962, develop sila mga missiles. Then si Soviets di ay kay nag-install og mga missile sa Cuba para i-attack sa US. So si US pod nabalaka na pod si US kay ngano naga-install naman og missiles si Soviets sa Cuba. So mo to siya pagkuan nila is mag-spark na jud og war. However, there is an agreement. So kato na lang jud siya kanang na jud sa tip pero di lang gyapon magtuloy. So mo to siya agreement was made to withdraw the missile. So walay nangyari nga war lang gihapon. So the Cuban Missile Crisis showed both superpowers were not ready to use nuclear weapons. Na kung igamiton to nilang tanan, wala na ta. Mo to, di ba, fear of retaliation and annihilation. So kato siya mo tong ginaingon nila nga end of the world. So makita na ko kanang sa mga mga theories, mga conspiracy theories na ang end of the world jud daw, alang pagtuna is end of the world daw is through daw nuclear annihilation. So mo to daw since countries kan lang today in today's time dili lang US o Russia ang ang naay mga nuclear weapons. So in time of a war, nuclear war, so mo tong pag tong ilang ginabilive na mag-end ang world because of this nuclear weapons. However, we're going back to the Cold War period. They later on sign the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty in 1963, which will ban above-ground nuclear weapon testing. So kato siya, pwede lang gapon sila maka develop og mga nuclear weapon. However, katong pag-test lang nila ang giban ani nga treaty. Especially katong nangyari sa katong 1949 na pagbomba ng mga Soviets. That was a nuclear test. I believe that was in modern day Kazakhstan pero under kon pa to siya under Soviet Union. So kato siya dito nila gina-perform tong mga missile test nila. But in this treaty, ginabawa, gibanned na ang pag-test sa nuclear weapon, especially pag above ground or sa ground nila i-test ang kaning nga mga weapons. So, this crisis hardens the Soviets' determination against military inferiority. So, kato super powerful sila per na sila ma-feel nga ma-inferior ang gapon sila because of this. One of this is the treaty. They choose na sige isa pa lang nato ang nuclear test, and with that decision feel nila nga na inferior na pud sila kay dili nila ma-pursue guro nila ilang gusto. So with that, they began building conventional and strategic forces that the United States was forced to match for the next 25 years. So dili man sila makakuan sa nuclear weapons, so na sila laing strategy nga para malamangan nila ang United States. Nga in the next years pod lamangon na pod kanang lamang-lamangon na pod sa United States. So sige lang sila lamangay ani nga time. So US and Soviet Union avoided direct military confrontation in Europe in order to keep allies from defecting to the other side or overthrow them. Di ba tong sa key features nato sa Cold War, di ba? They support or they check or update their countries. So di ba? So here they also done actions para ma-keep nila ang allies, para daghan dapat sila mga allies nga naa sa ila, mag-support sa ila. Para kumbaga kung naay mangyari nga conflict, mo side sila sa ilaha o kung after man ana nga conflict kay dili sila i-overthrow ana nga mga ally nila nga countries. So anong ginawa ng Soviet Union? So Soviet Union sent troops in East Germany in 1953, Hungary in 1956, Czechoslovakia in 1968, and Afghanistan in 1979. So mo lang way nga pangpakip sa mga allies nila magpadalang gyapon sila mga troops ani nga mga country. Then in the United States, ang ginawa ng United States, they helped overthrow a left-wing government in Guatemala in 1954. So nitabang sila sa countries, especially in Guatemala, in overthrowing a left-wing government, supportive and unsuccessful invasion of Cuba in 1961. They also invaded the Dominican Republic in 1965 and Grenada in 1983, and undertook a long and unsuccessful effort from 1964 to 1975, the Vietnam War ni siya, no, to prevent communist North Vietnam from bringing South Vietnam under its rule. So kanipod si United States, hilig pud ni siya no makialam sa mangyari sa ubang bansa, especially pag naadyo ni siya nga term katong communism. Kasi diba North Vietnam is under the communist rule, and also South Vietnam is lahi sa ila. So katong ka nangyari sa North, para sa nangyari sa North and South Korea, North Vietnam and South Vietnam is also under war. So there is also now another war happening in the Cold War. So it is the Vietnam War. So with that, US naghatag po silang mga tropa upang mapigilan ang katong communist rule sa North Vietnam. However, wala kato siya unsuccessful ang ilang mga effort since Vietnam is now under the control of socialist. So, last na siya, yes, last na part, toward a new world order. So actually before this, dagan pa silang mga strategies ang USSR and the United States, di ba? There is different mga larangan or iba pang mga aspects ang kanilang tunggalian, especially when it comes to powers. One of this is the space race. Space race or space war. So, isa sa mga aspect ano ang space, paunhanay, na sila race nga paunhanay kung kinsa ang makaabot sa, kinsang makaadto sa space. So, in that time, the Soviets achieved to have the first man from them to be launched into space. So that was Yuri Gagarin, a cosmonaut from the Soviets. So nakuan ang US kay nakauna na ang Soviets na muadto sa space. However, nakauna na pud ang United States because of kato siya, Neil Armstrong, nakapadala po sila pinakauna nga tao nga makaadto sa moon. So mo to siya. Isa to sila sa mga tunggalian nila during that time Cold War. That is one, the space race or space war. So we have now the New World Order. So this is now from coming of an end to the Cold War. So the bipolar struggle between US and the Soviet Union gave way to more complicated international relationship. So in the di ba, bipolar struggle between US lang and Soviet Union, o kato mga countries magpili sila asang choices nga kuan ana gusto ana nila between US and Soviet Union. However, as time progresses, kani nga bipolar struggle ni ugat ay ni kalat pa dyan siya into more complicated nga international relationship which caused the world to no longer split into two blocks. So daghan pa jud mga na split, especially kani siya kating bipolar struggle. So in 1960, Soviet Union and China split. Diba? China is under the Soviet Union since China is under the communist rule. So in 1960, Soviet Union and China split, shattering the unity of the communist bloc. So isa ni sila sa mga country nga kusog, especially when it comes to spreading communism. Since nag-split na sila ani nga time, so nawala na ang unity sa communist bloc. And then Western Europe and Japan achieved dynamic economic growth in the 1950s and 60s. So as Cold War progresses, nangawala ang bipolar struggle, more countries, especially in Western Europe and also Japan, have the chance or the ability na to achieve economic growth. And with that, reduce their relative inferiority to the United States. So with that, more or less powerful countries assert their independencies. Nawala naman ang bipolar struggle between US and the Soviet Union. So more countries, especially under rule of of the United States, assert their independence. Na since wala naman kay bipolar struggle, they have the chance to have their independence and to control their own country. Diba? And showed resistance to superpower coercion. So wala na sila, di na sila gusto makialam or maki-join sa kaning duha ka struggle kani si US and si Soviet Union. So in the 1970s, there is an ease in the Cold War tension. So pag abot sa 1970s, ang Cold War tension mas ni weaken na ang tension in Cold War, especially because of this strategic arms limitation talks or SALT. So this agreement nasigduhan no SALT 1 and SALT 2 in 1972 and 1979. So here it sets limits on their anti-ballistic missiles and strategic missiles capable of carrying nuclear weapons. Di ba tong sa unang nga treaty sa nuclear test raman to siya. So in this SALT agreement, limitahan na lang ang paghimo or pag-produce nila og mga missiles or mga nuclear weapons. However, in the early 1980s, Cold War tensions renewed as massive arms continued to build up and competed for influence in the third world. So bawal naman sila ning mga missiles, so mga armas na lang ilang renew ilang gina-produce og taman-taman gina-develop nila. So mo lang gyapon parang wala murag katulad ay mawala ang dako nga kwan kanang destruction because of the weapons. However, katulad ginalagay po yung mga massive arms ilang gina-develop. So parang nawala lang gyapon sa silbi ang kani nga SALT agreements. And the Cold War began to break down in the late 1980s. So because of this, one of the prominent figure is this person, Mikhail S. Gorbachev. So he is a Russian, leader of the Soviet Union. So he's from the Soviet Union. So because of his ruling, he dismantled the totalitarian aspects of Soviet system. So pag-abot sa 1980s siya na ang ni puli sa pwesto sa Soviet Union. So pag niya sa pwesto is gi-dismantle, gipahawa na niya ang kato-totalitarian nga control in the Soviet system and begins to democratize it. He introduced the democratization in the Soviet Union. And also in the collapse of communist regimes in Soviet bloc countries of Eastern Europe in 1989 to 1990s, he acquiesced in their fall. So gitanggap niya ang fall sa mga Soviet bloc sa Eastern European countries. So wala na siya si Bikael wala na siya ni palag sa pag-fall ani mga communist regimes kani mga Soviet blocs. So gitanggap na niya ang pag-fall ani niya. So the rise of power of democratic governments in East Germany, Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia was quickly followed by the unification of West and East Germany under NATO auspices with Soviet approval. So here with the fall of the communist regime, there is a rise to the democratic government, especially in East Germany, Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. And also with this, there is now the unification of West and East Germany. Have you know the situation, especially with Germany, the Berlin Wall, di ba? Kung gatong gihiwalay ang Germany into East and West nga kuan. So moto siya kato ang isa kay gi-control sa communism, ang isa kay control sa katong sa United States nga ideologies influence. So with that, during this the time of Gorbachev, kato siya the unification of West and East Germany. And with Gorbachev's internal reforms, it weakened the Communist Party and allowed the power to shift to Russia and other constituent republics of the Soviet Union. Since wala naman tong Communist Party, wala na tong kanang grabe nga control, totalitarian control, because of different reforms made by Gorbachev's. So, murag na weekend na siya ang sa communist hold or block. So kani siya ang power nasa sa sa USSR sa Soviet Union is na shift na into Russia and other constituent republics of the Soviet Union. So with that, it led to, in late 1991, Soviet Union collapsed and 15 newly independent nations were born. So including Russia, so former USSR, Soviet Union, we have now Russia and other 15 newly independent nation. So one is as you can see in the pictures, kani sila tanan, kaning naka-colored is under ni sila sa USSR. However, pag-abot sa pag-collapse sa communist regime or sa Soviet Union, nagkaroon na ng 15 countries. So, we have Russia, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. So, muna sila ang 15 newly independent nations. And with that, the Cold War had come to an end. So that is also now the end on the discussion about World War. So mo to siya tanan, sir. Hello, sir. Mo na to siya, sir. Any questions po? Kuya Anuta and Noor, any questions?